The next group of problems, 21 through 32, involve a combination of working with absolute values and the order of operations. We're actually on the next page now, so let me make a note that I'm working on page 79. I've asked you to do questions 21 and 25 through 31 odd on this page. I'm going to do question number 26, 28, and 30. These all deal with absolute value, but they get increasingly difficult in their use of the order of operations as well. Let's start with question number 26. I'm asked to simplify the expression, the absolute value of 10 minus 3 minus the absolute value of 4 minus 1. Your book does mention that when you're working with the absolute value of sums and differences, you must simplify the expression inside the absolute value symbols first, and then find the absolute value of the simplified expression. What that really means, though, is that you can treat the absolute value bars as though they're sort of great big parentheses. They're parentheses in the same way that parentheses in the order of operations would be applied. In other words, do what's inside the parentheses first, and then finally subtract these two values. So the first thing I need to do is simplify what's inside these absolute value bars and what's inside these absolute value bars. Then I'll take their absolute values and finally I'll subtract them. Inside the first set of absolute value bars, I have a subtraction problem. 10 minus 3. 10 minus 3 is 7. When I do that subtraction, I can just drop its result straight down. But notice, I haven't removed the absolute value bars. I've simply done the work inside them. Inside the second set of absolute value bars, I have another arithmetic problem to do. 4 minus 1. 4 minus 1 is 3. Now that I've done the work inside the grouping symbols, I can evaluate the absolute value of the number 7. The number 7 is 7 units away from 0 on the number line. So the absolute value of 7 is 7, a distance of 7. I can also evaluate the absolute value of 3. The number 3 is 3 units away from 0 on the number line. So the value of the absolute value of 3 is 3. What I'm asked to do is to subtract these numbers, one from the other. Finally, I can subtract the 3 from the 7. My answer is 4. In question number 28, I'm asked to evaluate 12 minus the absolute value of 9 minus 3 times the quantity 7 minus 5. In order to do this, I need to work inside the nested grouping symbols. In other words, I need to do this piece first. Once I've done that subtraction, I'll multiply my result by 3. Once I've done that multiplication, I'll take the result I have from that and subtract it from 9. Only then will I take its absolute value. Another way to think of this is that there's a small problem inside a larger problem. We're going to work on this piece first, the piece inside the absolute value bars. Inside the absolute value bars, I have the expression 9 minus 3 times The difference between 7 and 5, 7 minus 5, is 2. I have to do this first, because order of operations tells me I must do my work inside the parentheses first, before adding or subtracting, multiplying or dividing anything outside the parentheses. So I have to do this step first. What this problem looks like now, though, is 9 minus 3 times 2. When I read it out loud, I can see that I don't actually need those parentheses anymore. If I can find another way to indicate multiplication. Here, order of operations tells me that I need to do multiplication before addition or subtraction. So I need to multiply these two numbers together before I go on and do the subtraction. Finally, I can take the 9 minus 6, and from that, I get 3. It's very important to note, however, that everything we've been doing has been inside the absolute value bars. Really, I've only been doing a part of my problem, not the whole thing. I've done it this way on purpose because I wanted you to see that what I was doing was kind of a mini problem. What I really should have done is to write down the rest of the problem as I went along. Here's what I mean by that. When I did this problem, 9 minus 3 times 7 minus 5, it was inside absolute value bars, and those absolute value bars are subtracted from 12. When I did this problem, it was really 9 minus 3 times 2, but that also was inside absolute value bars, and it was subtracted from 12. The 3 I got from inside the absolute value bars here was also subtracted from 12. So although I was thinking in terms of doing a smaller problem, I really should have been writing down all the other pieces, even though I wasn't actually using them. This is a very good practice to take in mathematics. It'll help you keep track of the work that you're doing, and it'll help you remember to do all the steps. Now that we've got our work down to a more basic problem, let's finish it up. I still have absolute value bars here, so I can't just subtract 3 from 12. First, I need to evaluate what is the absolute value of 3. The absolute value of 3 is how many units 3 is away from 0 on the number line, and that's 3. But once I've evaluated this, again, I need to note that this value has been subtracted from 12, and only now can I finalize my problem. 12 minus 3 is 9, so there's my final answer. Question number 30 looks like this. 25 minus the absolute value of 9 minus 3 times 4 times 5 minus 18, all of that minus 20. I need to remember that my absolute value bars are a little bit like parentheses. I need to do what's inside here first. Within the absolute value bars, I have this smaller problem which also contains parentheses. So I need to do what's inside there, even before I do anything else inside the absolute value bars. In the parentheses, order of operations tells me I need to do this multiplication before I do this subtraction. I'm not going to be working with this 3 or 9 or with the 25 or the 20, not right away, but I'm going to write them down anyway. It's good practice so that I don't forget that I have other things in the problem that I am not working with at the moment. Even here, this 9 minus 3 times If I write that down, I'm less likely to forget to finish the problem later. Within these parentheses, multiplication of 4 times 5 gives me 20, and I have to do that before I can subtract the 18. Now that I've done the multiplication, I can do the subtraction. I'm going to rewrite everything else and just do the subtraction. 20 minus 18 is 2. Now, I'm down to multiplication here. Although there are still parentheses in my problem, there's nothing inside those parentheses that I can do anymore. So I don't know how you learned it. A lot of people learn parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, addition and subtraction for order of operations. What I'm talking about just now is I've done the work inside the parentheses. Even though there are parentheses still in the problem, there's nothing left to do. So I've finished with the parentheses. The next thing I would do would be to work with exponents, but there aren't any in this problem. So the next step is to work with any multiplication or division. Well, keep in mind that I'm still working inside this smaller area, this smaller problem. So I'm going to do any multiplication and division that I find inside the grouping symbols that are the absolute value before I do addition and subtraction. This is one area where a lot of students make mistakes. It's very tempting to look at this 9 minus 3 and say, oh, that's 6. I'll make that 6 and then multiply it by 2. But we must do multiplication before we do addition and subtraction. So as tempting as this is, make sure you do the multiplication first and then subtract your result from 9. 3 minus 2 is 6. This minus can just be dropped down. This 9 can just be dropped down. Now I have a problem that looks more like this. 25 minus the absolute value of 9 minus 6 minus 20. Move that up the page so we can continue working. Since absolute value bars are like parentheses, the next thing I must do is the 9 minus 6. So once again, I'm going to copy down the rest of the problem so that I don't forget to do the work with those numbers when I'm done. 9 minus 6 is 3. I'm still working in my absolute value bars. At this point, I only have a number in there. So now what I need to do is evaluate the absolute value of 3. 3 is 3 units from 0 on the number line. So I can replace the absolute value of 3 with 3. Now all I have left is a subtraction and a subtraction. Since all I have is addition and subtraction, I go from left to right. 25 minus 3 is 22. 22 minus 20 is 2. My final answer is 2. I'd like to make an observation, since none of the problems that we've just worked actually have this come up. Sometimes when you're working with an absolute value, the numbers you end up with inside the absolute value are negative. I'm going to do the same things here. I have to do multiplication before I do subtraction, but I have to do what's inside the parentheses before I do any of that. Let me write down the 2 minus 4 times so I don't forget. 6 minus 1 is 5. There's my inside the parentheses work, the P in my PEMDAS. Now I'm going to do multiplication. 4 times 5 is 20. Now I can do the subtraction, but I'm still working inside the absolute value bars. What's 2 minus 20? Well, that's negative 18. Negative 18 is 18 units away from 0 on the number line. So for this piece anyway, my final answer is 18, not negative 18.